And we continue at 1:07 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, in an effort to appeal to both sides of the aisle, here's some bipartisan humor from Katy Porter as she riffs on Bidenomics.
President Biden has a lot of good economic news, and he decides to name this after himself. Never name an economic movement after yourself. Okay? I didn't like Reaganomics. I like the actual Bidenomics, but don't name this stuff after yourself.
I wonder what Grampy Joe thinks about that.
And then we went to sleep.
Actually, he has a term that he uses for Katy Porter.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, Randy, I have even more good information, good news for you today. Are you ready for it?
Why, yes.
Our awful district attorney in Los Angeles County, who's doing everything he can to help out every criminal in Los Angeles County, who's running for re-election, is as broke as a joke.
Quite frankly.
Listen to this. Out of all the money that he has raised, he only has $28,000 on hand and debts totaling $30,000.
He's in the hole.
$28,000. That's it. For an incumbent sitting district attorney in the largest county in the nation. I don't think $28,000 would buy you a brand new Nissan Altima.
Might buy you a used one.
That was an Altima ALTMA 489-9410. Please move it now. You're blocking someone.
It's certainly not going to buy you the DA's office.
What happened to all his supporters?
We got some wobbly-knees allies.
Are they wobbly-kneesed allies?
Wait, all of his supporters? By all of his supporters, do you mean George Soros?
Well, apparently he's not even opening his wallet.
Well, maybe he's not giving it to...
You almost said it. You almost said it.
You know, it's funny. After we emailed about 9,000 people the secret George Gascon nickname, you know who I ran into at Jersey Mike's right after that show?
Who's that?
Lucy Arnaz.
Oh, wow.
She was right next to me. And I thought, okay, I'm familiar with your politics, so I'm not going to tell you this, but if you were on my team, you'd really get a chuckle.
Anyone doesn't know what the nickname is, you can email us at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com.
Anyway, things aren't looking bright for George Gascon, and that is good news for the people of Los Angeles County. Joining us to talk about this and much, much more is the editor of the California Globe, who you can read online at californiaglobe.com and follow on Twitter at Katy Sack Citizen. Katy Grimes, welcome.
Hello, John. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. And I'll tell you, it's music to my ears to hear that George Gascon is flat broke.
Oh, my gosh. I know. It is. It's not surprising either, though. It did seem like for the longest time he had nothing but money. I mean, he survived, a couple of recall attempts, kind of like our governor. But now he's just so toxic. I don't even think he can get local Democrats to give him money.
Last time around, a number of elected Democrats stabbed Jackie Lacey in the back by rescinding their endorsements and then endorsing George Gascon. Adam Schiff, Burbank congressman, candidate for U.S. Senate, was one of them. So did Laura Friedman, who is a sitting member of the California Assembly, currently running to replace Adam Schiff, and others. What do you see elected Democrats doing this time? Are they going to stay out of the race? Are they going to get behind him? Are they going to pretend like they don't know who he is? How are they going to react?
I think because they are such shallow, superficial people, they're going to pretend they don't know him and just hope it all goes away. I think he's that toxic at this point.
Why is Soros not ponying up money?
Because I think his useful idiot George Gascon has served his purpose, at least up to this point. And it looks like there are some other really legitimate candidates. Obviously people currently in the DA's office certainly are. But I think even Soros would recognize if one of his minions has become so toxic that, maybe better let this one slide for a while.
Well, if he's cutting bait on George Gascon, it would be interesting to me to see if he cuts bait on all of his other dinner theater versions of himself all over the country, including up in Alameda County with that crazy woman with the crazy eyes, Pam Price. Mm-hmm. You've got one in New York City. You've got one in Chicago. You got one in Philadelphia. They tried to install one in Orange County. That didn't work out, thank God. Same thing with Sacramento County and San Diego County. But if George Gascon cuts bait on these people and he's not going to be propping them up with all of his money, they are all going to go down because they've turned all of their jurisdictions into complete dangerous hellholes.
Exactly. And that's the part where I say they're toxic. I mean, whether we're talking about Larry Krasner in Philadelphia or Kim Foxx in, where is she? I forget.
Chicago.
They're all just, all of them are absolute human disasters. It kind of makes you wonder how any of them even pass law school in a lot of cases. But they've just turned their cities into hellholes. And a dangerous hellhole city is not a partisan issue. It doesn't belong to Republicans. In this case, it certainly belongs to Democrats. But the people that are hurt most by it are all of the people. It's not one or the other. And so I think that's where they recognize that throwing more money at it at this point isn't going to fix the Soros candidates. So they're probably going to have to cut bait and leave.
Well, and George Gascon, you could be a political radical, but have good political instincts, and you can figure out ways to make yourself likable and put yourself on the popular side of certain subjects. His political instincts are absolutely awful. The big story locally down here in Los Angeles all week is the assassination and the murder of an L.A. County deputy sheriff who was murdered for no reason other than the fact that he was a deputy sheriff sitting in his car working. Yeah. Now George Gascon has come out and said he is not going to charge the person who admitted to this crime with the death penalty because that quote-unquote won't bring the officer back.
Yeah, brilliant statement. I agree with you on his political choices. I mean, that is so outrageous. Again, a nonpartisan issue. It is absolutely outrageous. If this isn't a death penalty case, I don't know what is. But in George Gascon's world, frankly, similar to Jerry Brown's world and Gavin Newsom's, they don't believe in the death penalty, so that's what we get.
But just looking at the pure politics of this, you are siding with a man who admitted to murdering a police officer, and you are pissing off everyone in there, or not everyone, I guess. There are some people who believe like Gascon, and maybe some of them are even happy this happened. I don't know. There's some screwed up people out there. But you are putting yourself in the extreme minority, and you're doing so as the person, one of the few people who actually has the ability to do something about this, and you are abdicating your duty. It's unbelievable to me.
It is. But again, I don't think he's the Los Angeles County District Attorney because of any sense of duty other than, frankly, John, to his funder or funders. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these really radical politicians. They talk over the heads of the constituents. They talk over the heads, in this case, of their ADAs. They talk over the heads of victims because they don't care about those people. All they care about is the special interest or the radical ideology they were put in place to support and spread.
I'll tell you, Gavin Newsom is the one who initially appointed George Gascon to be the DA in San Francisco, endorsed him when he ran for DA in Los Angeles. Rob Bonta, the Attorney General, endorsed George Gascon and put pictures of the two of them all over social media. Adam Schiff endorsed him. All of these people all of these politicians should be asked about George Gascon on a daily basis. You look at these Republican debates. Donald Trump is not participating in these debates, but all of those candidates get asked about Donald Trump every time they go into a public space. It doesn't matter if it's on the debate stage. It doesn't matter if it's in an interview. It doesn't matter where it is. They get asked about Donald Trump 24/7, even if Donald Trump is not relevant to whatever the subject that they're talking about. The same thing should happen with all of these California politicos. They should be asked about George Gascon every time they step in front of a microphone, because they are the ones that are responsible for him being in the position of power that he's in, and they need to answer questions too.
You bring up an excellent point, John, and I totally agree with you. I hope the other candidates are listening right now, because they're the ones that could force that issue. I certainly don't trust particularly your local media to do that, but the candidates can do it.
Well, I'll tell you, there is part of me who believes that George Gascon doesn't make it out of the primary. And that would be a great thing, because we have any number of viable candidates running for that office who have more money than George Gascon. However, what worries me and keeps me up at night is having him as a lame duck in that office for 9 months, because we moved the primary up from June to March. And we will have a disgruntled employee who is also a radical who wants to burn the county down from within the office of the district attorney for 9 full months. I don't know if the county can withstand that.
Boy, you bring up a very good point. I don't know if after that point an impeachment or a recall can take place. I don't know what the procedures are. But, yeah, he would be far more dangerous at that point even than he is now, with absolutely no accountability. I agree.
We're speaking with Katy Grimes, who's the editor of the California Globe. You can read her online at californiaglobe.com. On the subject of that murdered deputy sheriff, Gavin Newsom, who is the governor of California, has not been here, has not met with the family, has not attended any of the vigils, has not attended any of the press conferences. He is currently in New York City speaking with the national news and the United Nations about climate change instead. And he's out as a surrogate for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, talking them up. He's acting as if he doesn't have a day job and he has no official duties in the state of California. It seems to me that he has totally moved on from his day job as CEO of the state of California, and all he's looking for is to get in Joe Biden's good graces so that if he wins re-election, he can get an appointment in Washington, D.C.
Yes, this is Gavin Newsom's shadow campaign for something. We know he believes he is qualified and should be running for president, but he has to bide his time, just like he did back in 2010 when he ran for governor and was summarily smacked down by Jerry Brown and Jerry Brown's supporters. So Gavin Newsom's used to having to wait for what he wants, but I agree with you. He is not spending much time in our state on his shadow campaign running for president or running for something bigger. We'll just say that.
What do you make of that George Skelton column that ran in the Los Angeles Times saying that he really does not believe Gavin Newsom is running for president and doesn't want the job? And George Skelton said he doesn't want it because of his severe dyslexia. He hates giving speeches. He can't read a teleprompter. He has to memorize everything. He can make it work in California because he finds ways around doing the state address. He'll go on the road or have different press conferences, those sorts of things. But if you're president, there's no way you can avoid giving speeches on a daily basis. And he thinks Gavin Newsom is not equipped to do that.
I find several things wrong with Mr. Skelton's column. First and foremost is we had to suffer through almost 3 years of Gavin Newsom giving daily press conferences and speeches during the COVID pandemic, in which he had us all locked down and media had no access to him to ask him any questions. So there's that. He loved it. Are you kidding me? He loves giving speeches, and he prides himself on being able to memorize stats and figures and facts. They're his facts, but he loves it. I think George Skelton was either asked by Gavin Newsom's people or decided to do it on his own, but to run interference for him, to give him a little breathing room for this shadow campaign he's running for president.
Well, maybe this is a make good because George Skelton really pissed off Kamala Harris when he wrote his column saying that Gavin Newsom should appoint Kamala to a U.S. Senate seat in California. That gets her out of Joe Biden's way. It allows him to fulfill a promise he made to appoint a black female to the U.S. Senate, and everybody wins. Kamala Harris was so upset about that piece when it ran that her people were reaching out to the local press down here in Los Angeles and offering up her press secretary so they could do damage control.
Yeah. Again, this only provided cover for Gavin Newsom, certainly for no one else. And I think it just had the feeling of a gigantic fluff piece to me. And I think it is very interesting that Kamala Harris was furious about it. She should have been, because as she just keeps telling everybody, I'm the vice president. I'm the vice president. Of course we're running for re-election.
And whenever any Democrat is asked about whether or not she's the most qualified person for the job, it doesn't matter if it's Nancy Pelosi, Jamie Raskin, whoever, none of them give the answer that she wants to hear.
Of course. Yeah. She's not qualified to be Sacramento dog catcher, believe me. And she, just like Gavin Newsom, has failed up her entire political career because they've never had to go through an actual vetting. They've never been properly challenged because of our one-party state. So they've had it easy. And frankly, for Kamala, this is the first time she's ever been challenged by anybody, frankly. So, yeah, she and Gavin are kind of fighting the same fight right now.
Katy Grimes, editor of the California Globe. You can read her online at californiaglobe.com and follow her on Twitter at KatySackCitizen. Katy Grimes, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, John.
Right now we're going through the sound of Orange County Congresswoman and current candidate for U.S. Senate, Katy Porter, at a fundraiser in Hollywood.
All right, let's see what categories we've got. We've got Katy Porter on oversight, Katy Porter on being a policy warrior, Katy Porter on consumer protection, Katy Porter on income inequality, Katy Porter on AIs, Katy Porter on committees, or Katy Porter on federal, state, and local government, or Katy Porter on disaffected voters.
Let's do Katy Porter on income inequality.
Here we go. Get ready for the yucks.
Our economy will tip over if we don't address income inequality. I mean, this is
the somber part of the speech.
The prop comedy doesn't make an appearance here.
It might.
I mean, this is what every student of history will tell you about every economy. Our politics will tip over, our democracy will tip over, and our economy will tip over if we don't address it.
That's a lot of tipping over.
No one's standing up straight.
Well, it is a very tipsy crowd.
So this is fundamentally about what does a healthy economy look like? And it looks like a healthy capitalist economy looks like one where there is mobility, where there is opportunity, and where the people who generate the work and the productivity and the gains are able to share in it.
Okay, stop the tape. If you care about upward mobility, you grow up poor, you become rich. The best thing that the government can do for that person, better than anything else, and there are volumes of social science that back this up, is provide them with a quality education. If you provide someone who has initiative, has a work ethic, and the desire to learn with a quality education, the sky is the limit. But Katy Porter and her allies in the teachers' unions and her allies running the state of California shut those schools down for a very long time so they could win their union concessions. What they did to the children of California was about the cruelest thing you could do to a child who's looking for upward mobility.
Our learning spaces are special places.
They took that away from them so they could give the teachers' unions a plum.
And that's fundamentally where we're not there with where we are in income inequality today. The tough part, of course, is what do you do about it once you've got it, right? So I think we need a two-pronged approach here. We're hearing some progressive Democrats make a lot of noise about things like a wealth tax and how could we think about the gap between corporate CEO pay, for example, and worker pay. I think that's important, but we also have to address the forward-going piece of it. And I think that's where making sure workers have power, making sure there's competition to bring down prices, making sure that we reinvigorate our shareholder laws. So let me give you a nerdy but like personal passion of mine. Here's a hot take in corporate America. I think stock buybacks should be illegal. And
she got a whistle for that one.
Maybe it was just Sheila Keel ordering a drink.
And by the way, lest you think I'm a lunatic, they were for most of our country's history. They were illegal because stock buybacks are fundamentally about taking people out of owning a company, turning them from shareholders into non-shareholders in order to boost the stock price of people whose compensation is coming down the pike and going to be paid in stock. So dividends are very regulated. You can only give out a dividend. There's all these laws around it. Stock buybacks are like the wild, wild west.
She sounds like our guy in Oakland.
The wild, wild west.
Let me just save that. I'm sure it will get used at some point.
Wild, wild west. And they just need to stop. And we see this with Big Pharma, who is spending 3 times more on stock buybacks and dividends than they are on research and development. So when they tell you the reason drugs cost so much is R&D, that is just not true, right? And so I've used the whiteboard and done this in a hearing and showed this.
I used the whiteboard on that one.
More for prop comedy.
That's Katy Porter on income inequality.
Let's hear Katy Porter on trying to win over centrist voters.
All righty, that's the very end of the speech. Here is Katy Porter on that.
Get this right. The question was, we have people who are very polarized, both sides pointing the finger at each other. What would you do to bring centrists in? What would you do to reach out to those remaining Republicans? And what kinds of compromises would you be willing to make to do it? Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay. Now let me tell you why I want to push back at the question. The vast majority of non-reliable Democratic voters today are not centrists. That is a fallacy. And I know because this is what I heard over and over and over again when I ran in Orange County. You have to be a moderate. You can't support Medicare for all. You have to support business. You have to take the corporate PAC checks. You can't be willing. The reason people are not Democrats today is not that they are with the Republicans on values, or that some days they feel like, LGBTQ people should be shamed, and other days they feel like they should be protected. They're not having that kind of, there's no center on that, right? It's that they're disaffected. It's that they look at both parties and they say, I don't see myself in either party.
Okay, what she's saying is fundamentally untrue. And if she believes that, she's going to lose. What she just said to you right now is that the people who are registered Democrats who don't vote are Rachel Maddow acolytes. They are doctrinaire left-wing on all subjects across the board, and they don't show up and vote because they don't think the Democrats are legitimately left-wing enough. That is not true. Most people who don't vote for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because they're just busy. Sometimes they're apolitical. Sometimes they are set in the political independence, but they lean one way or another. They're soft Republicans. They're soft Democrats. If you are a political animal and you have thought these subjects through and you have a very strong ideology, you are not a non-voter. What she just described doesn't exist. Now, the coalitions, the Republican coalition and the Democratic coalition, they're constantly evolving. They're always changing. And you have certain parts of a coalition who are ancestral, who don't really fit that well. And when you don't fit well in the coalition that you belong to, then sometimes you fall off and sometimes you don't vote. Mitt Romney is a perfect example of the type of person that increasingly does not exist in the Republican Party. He's a Republican because he is a Wall Street guy back when Wall Street guys were Republicans, and his family lined up that way, and it's part of his lineage. But the Mitt Romneys of the world are the ones that are leaving the Republican Party right now. The Democrats relied on blue-collar whites for years and years and years. The auto workers, the Teamsters, people who lived in places like West Virginia and Ohio. Those people all voted Democrat. And now they're breaking off from that coalition and they're becoming Republicans. And they're the ones that voted for Donald Trump, and they're the ones that voted for the candidates that Donald Trump got behind. Those are who those people are. The hardcore lefties aren't going anywhere. They're Democrats. They're part of that coalition. They vote Democrat, and that's just the way it is. Hardcore right-wingers, they're Republican. They're not going anywhere. And if you have this huge population of people that really care about politics, but they don't vote, I don't know who you're talking about. The people that don't vote are flakes. The people that don't vote are people who only passingly pay attention to it, or they only pay attention to it when something directly impacts their life. There's a war that they think their kid is going to get drafted into. So suddenly they start paying attention and they start voting. There is a tax that would destroy their industry. There's something that directly impacts their life that causes them to behave in ways they would otherwise not behave in, which is voting. Those are the people who exist, who you can motivate at certain times. A lot of them, by the way, voted in 2020 and 2022, in part because of COVID and the way we changed how we do our elections. Every single one of them got a ballot in their mailbox. And when you make it super easy for flakes to vote, then more of them will vote than otherwise would. Because if they're driving home from work and they have time to either go stand in line and cast a ballot or hit the drive-thru at Jack in the Box and have their jumbo jack in their hand sooner, well, for a flaky voter, they may choose the jumbo jack. Those are the people who exist who don't vote. And if she thinks they're all left-wing ideologues, she's nuts.
Did you just use a food reference to make a point about Katy Porter?
Nuts?
The Jack in the Box.
Oh, yes. I didn't intend to, but now that I think about it,
she makes you have food on the brain.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Well, Johnny, when I said we probably have an email here, I forgot to mention that whether it's sifting through all the people asking for George Gascon's nickname or all the Katy Porter emails that are too filthy for the air, I'm having a hard time finding one that I can just straight up read.
Yeah, you might have to do some editing.
I will say this. In response to me sending someone George Gascon's nickname, someone wrote back, I can never unhear that now. Thank you so much.
Right now, we're going through the sound of Orange County Congresswoman Katy Porter's fundraiser in Hollywood.
Let's continue hearing what Katy Porter thinks about the disaffected voters.
I don't see people doing things to clean up government in either party. I gave the example of congressional stock trading earlier, but I could give others, corporate PAC money being another one, acting on gun violence prevention. So I think the solution here is to be more frank and address at their core why people don't trust Democrats. In other words, why does somebody who's very progressive and very liberal in many, many, many ways and shares a lot of values check the box to be a no-party preference voter? That is the fastest growing political party in the United States. No party preference. And how are we going to keep those voters? How are we going to stay connected to those voters? And those voters are disproportionately younger and browner.
That's a weird thing to say.
disproportionately younger and browner.
They're younger and browner.
And they are our future majority. So I think that's one huge part. The second thing I would say is stronger message on the economy. And that is something where Democrats really need to get better. President Biden has a lot of good economic news, and he decides to name this after himself. Never name an economic movement after yourself, okay? I didn't like Reaganomics. I like the actual Bidenomics, but don't name this stuff after yourself.
That's not bad. I'll give her that one.
She's right. You should never name it after yourself. Biden did it, and now he's freaking out, and he's trying to flip it, and he's trying to go after the Republicans. I forget the name that he came up with. It's MAGA something or another. But he realized he stepped in it pretty quickly.
Instead, talk to people about what this means. I mean, when he does this, he's actually really good, I think. He says, a lot of people are able to getting paid a little more than they used to be, or have moved up in jobs, or gotten promoted, or a lot of people are able, because of that little extra money at the wage, not to let go of that second job. And we have more work to do, but that's what I've delivered to you as president. So I have never met the voter. Young, old, white, brown, black, urban, rural, suburban, never.
Boy, there's a whole lot in there.
Does she sound like she's out of breath to you, too?
Young, old, white, brown, black, urban, rural, suburban, never.
Well, this is near the end of the speech. She's definitely been up there for an hour.
Okay.
Who wants a bad economy? Nobody's ever said, what are you going to do to take the economy? Nobody wants that. But we don't talk about economic problems.
Is she losing the audience, or are they just tired after all that dinner?
I think they're ready for dessert.
Nobody wants that. But we don't talk about economic problems as Democrats. We cede this to the party that's bad at it. That's nuts. We are the party.
What was that?
Someone right next to the microphone.
To the party that's bad at it. That's nuts.
Oh, that's got to be the person who's been filming this entire thing. That's the first time we've ever heard them actually laugh at this.
To the party that's bad at it. That's nuts. We are the...
She sounds like the Joker.
She does. That last final scene from the movie Batman with Jack Nicholson where he falls off the building and there's the device that he has in his pocket that's laughing.
That's nuts. We are the party that delivers the investments that create a strong, stable, globally competitive economy. And by God, we should win the voters on that issue. There was a study recently, 90% of Democratic messaging is about something other than the economy. 90% of messaging, press releases, social media, speeches, is about something other than the number one issue that every voter agrees on. So for me, it's not, I've never felt like, oh, how am I going to compromise? I don't ever face that. I do sometimes feel like I can't get Washington to see who they represent.
She is out of breath.
Completely out of breath.
Oh, and there's more, Johnny.
All right. We'll have more from Congresswoman Katy Porter later on in the show, but Doug McIntyre joins us next. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.
Hell no!